Hello, friends, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Wake Nation 21, the first YouTube fan channel dedicated to everything Wake Forest sports. My name is Josh Chilton, and I am your humble fan host. I am not a paid journalist. I do not work for Wake Forest. I am just a lifelong Wake fan who saw that there needs to be a greater base of YouTube content related to the Wake Forest community. And while there's a number of great writers and publications, including folks at the Winston-Salem Journal, blogger So Dear, Demon Deacon Digest, which all of those I thoroughly enjoy and appreciate how much insight and analysis they have given me over the years. We still do not have a full-time person dedicated to covering Wake Forest on YouTube. I'm trying to be the guy that changes that. And so, welcome. My dad, a little bit about me. I've been a Wake Forest fan since I was 7 years old. My dad went to Wake Forest. He worked for the institution for 35 years. And from the time I can first remember, I was watching Wake Forest football and Wake Forest basketball live games in Winston-Salem. I was running up as a little kid to try to get an autograph from Tim Duncan or Randolph Childress. And I would say I became a full-fledged Wake sports sicko by the time I reached my early teen years. Since then, over the past 30 years, I've watched just about every Wake Forest football, basketball game that has taken place. I've watched a lot of baseball. And while football and basketball are probably the two sports that get the most focus and will primarily be what I cover, I'm also going to try to make it a point to highlight other Wake Forest athletics teams as my times allow. But for our first video during these dog days of summer, it's time to get ready for football season. It's not that far away. The first game for Wake Forest football is going to take place a month and a half from now. And so now is the time for you diehard Demon Deacon fans like myself to start preparing for the future, for the season to come. In this video, I will try to give the audience a picture of what football at Wake is going to look like in the first year of the post-Clawson era. So whether you've already been plugged up during the whole offseason or need some catching up, this video will help us as fans start to settle in to the fresh start and new leadership under former Washington State University head coach and now Wake Forest University head football coach, Jake Dickert. And so without any further ado, I would just like to get into the, we got to go to our first slide here. Season preview for Wake Forest football 2025. And so what are our expectations going into this first season? And I think, the over-under that we're going to get into later is us winning 4.5 games. I think we can overachieve. I think we can beat that mark. And I'm going to try to start to make the case for why during this video. So first, let's just start with this transition. So we're under a new regime. On December 16th of 24, 11-year head coach and beloved head coach Dave Clawson resigned after 11 seasons. I would say the consensus, at least among fans that I know and I've talked to, is that perhaps it was a time for him to go, especially because you could almost tell he was not a big fan of the NIL era of college football. But despite his around 500 record, which is kind of skewed because his first few seasons, he was literally building from nothing. In his peak, he was one of the best Wake Forest football coaches of all time. Took us to 7 consecutive bowl games from 2016 to 2022. An ACC championship game appearance in 21. That same year, we reached the highest AP poll ranking in program history, being ranked 10th in the country. It's sad that only lasted for 1 week, but Dave Clawson's out. So who is in? Who is in is 41-year-old Jake Dickert, who left Washington State University to become the 33rd head coach in program history. There are a lot of things I like about Jake Dickert. If you've been watching the all access videos on YouTube that Wake's been putting out for the offseason, this guy has a leadership, he's just, the talent and leadership is just flowing out of him. And so that's going to be great for us. He was 23-20 in his 4 years at Washington State. He was 8-4 last year, and they got ranked up as high as 19th in the AP poll. What I like about Dickert is that he worked his way up the ranks. He was one of those guys who, once his football career was over, immediately jumped into a graduate assistant position. Midwestern guy, I think he's from Wisconsin originally, works his way up through the ranks at North Dakota State, South Dakota, Wyoming, and then finally at Washington State, where he was hired as the defensive coordinator in 2020. And then he became the interim head coach in 2021 when there was a bit of a controversy about vaccines and players. I don't remember exactly what happened, but under that interim coach tag, he did well enough to be named the permanent head coach, especially riding on the 40-13 victory that they had over their in-state, biggest rival, Washington, towards the end of that season. And if you've watched any of those all-access videos, you're going to see that a key component, if not the key component, that Jake Dickert brings is culture. He brings a culture. He brings an enthusiasm. He focuses on connection and bringing the juice. I love that saying on those videos. If you're juiceless, you're useless. And they have fast-paced practices that keep people in motion, not a lot of wasted time. That is one thing, beyond X's and O's, just as a program mover, I like that style. Jake Dickert reminds me of a little more authoritative version of Dave Clawson at the Carolina Panthers. Now, Dave Clawson realizes, I'm working with professionals, I'm working with grown men, while I think Coach Dickert realizes I'm working with teenagers sometimes, I'm working with young adults who are trying to become grown men. So he carries a little more authority in the way he talks. But their approach to practice, from what I've seen from these all-access videos, really gives me the feeling that they have a similar philosophy about how a practice should be run. And they emphasize building a culture that extends beyond just playing on the field, and a connection and care between the players. And he believes that is a key ingredient to success on the field. And I believe that too, as someone who has played football at different levels. The closer knit those teams were, it seemed like the better we did in the end. But Dickert is a defensive coach, so we should talk a little bit about his defensive scheme. And so Dickert's defensive scheme, from what I've researched, looks like a 4-2-5 base defense. So you got 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. Now, one of those defensive backs is going to be probably more like a rover slash third linebacker in a lot of instances. I would say for us, that player is almost certainly Devon Patterson, who I'm really excited to see this year. But that's the base defense. He believes in unpredictable, aggressive pressure packages. Now, there were some points last year where he was taking some heat from the Washington State fan base because there were certain situations where it would be like a 4th and 13 and the offense would go for it and he would bring the house. And maybe that works sometimes and maybe you have to live with it. Like when it works, you get all the glory, but when it doesn't work, you're going to take all the heat. But he's not afraid to do that. But I think that's something we need to be watching with this defense this year is what type of aggressive pressure is he going to bring? Can we get pressure with our front 4 in terms of the passing game defense, or do we need to bring that extra guy to get the pressure? He believes in 1 gap roles for defensive linemen. So this is basically alignment and assignment football. This is every player in that front 6, front 7 is responsible for covering a certain gap and not getting moved off that gap. And if it's a running play and the run is coming towards your gap, you are responsible for plugging that gap. And so he's not going to ask a lot of guys to be two gapping or taking on, double teams over and over again. He's going to want each guy to play their role. And if each guy does just their part, at least in that front 7, he's hoping the defense will be able to have a strong front against the run. Emphasis on generating turnovers. I mean, every defensive coach says that nowadays, right? Like the peanut punch, getting turnovers, but it's true. I mean, the turnover margin game in any level of football, if you win the turnover margin, meaning that you create more turnovers than you give up. I don't know what the exact stats are, but you're going to win a lot of football games just by winning that turnover margin. Swarm. He believes in swarming 11 hats to the football on every play. And I like that, man. I really like gang tackling. I like teams where, the guy on the back end who's not even part of the play is still sprinting over there at a good angle just in case the guy breaks free. I like when that first linebacker shows up and he's able to, even if he's only halfway making the tackle, by the time he's making that running back or receiver avoid his tackle, there's going to be 2-3 more guys headed his way. I like that swarm mentality on defense. So I'm really excited about that. Will our defensive coaching improve under Dickert? That's impossible to tell right now, but we can look at some numbers and take some guesses. You look at Washington State's defense pre-Dickert, 110th in yards per game, 118th in points per game. That's a bottom tier defense in the FBS level. But if you look at, 2021, 2022, 2023, you see pretty good improvement. Like it's kind of up and down, but you see where you're starting to look more like a top 50, 60 overall defense in the country. 23 would be more like a top 75 defense in the country, which isn't great, but isn't like horrible. 2024, they totally fell off. Now, there's a few explanations we can make for that. They lost at least 3 guys to the NFL. They lost some transfers. Shaw Smith-Wade, if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, the guy who's expected to be our starting slot corner for the Panthers this year, He was there in 23 and then gone in 24. So they did regress. How did they go 8-4 with such a bad defense last year? They had an offense that was just out of control and a quarterback who is now one of the top quarterbacks in college football. Wake's defense, at least the past 5 years under Clawson, we've been worse than, if you averaged all these numbers out, which I did not, you could see that our our lows are lower than Coach Dickert's. We're staying in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s at best. We never reached anything like a 37th ranked points per game defense. And in 2024, we hit a bottom where we were 119th in yards per game and 115th in points per game. So, like, the good news is, I guess, it can only go up from here, right? And I trust Coach Dickert. I don't know enough about schematically how everything's going to work and transfer over to the ACC, but I do trust that, like, he's going to emphasize that side of the ball in terms of his involvement, and he's going to do everything in his power to turn this defense around, which has plagued us for season after season. You guys know that better than I. Goodbye, slow mesh. So let's talk about some offense. Goodbye, slow mesh. So Washington State did have a prolific offense last year, but Dickert did not bring his OC from last year at Washington State over with him. Instead, he went and found a 36-year-old offensive coordinator who was the OC at South Alabama. And I know what you're thinking. Why are we going to get the offensive coordinator, an unproven 36-year-old, out of South Alabama? Well, let's talk about it. Another thing, just like Coach Dickert, I love about Coach Ezell is he knew what he wanted to do right after his playing career was over. He was a walk-on at Alabama, the Alabama, from 07 to 10, became a student assistant at Alabama in 11, graduate assistant at Colorado State for 2 years, then came back to Alabama as a graduate assistant, then offensive analyst, and spent 5 years there under Mario Cristobal, learning a lot of the Cristobal kind of scheme of offense. He was the South Alabama tight ends coach from 21 to 23, and then he was named the offensive coordinator going into the 2024 season. So we are hiring Wake. We just hired a offense coordinator who's been an offensive coordinator a total of 1 year. But that 1 year was pretty damn spectacular, right? I mean, 34 points per game, 447 total yards per game, balanced offense, almost 200 rushing yards per game, 32 rushing touchdowns, 241 passing yards per game, 21 passing touchdowns. I kind of wish he would have brought Gio Lopez, who was his quarterback at South Alabama, with him to Wake Forest. Somehow the Tar Heels got a hold of that quarterback. So the Tar Heels, when we play them this year, we will at least have an inside scoop on Gio Lopez as a dual threat weapon, who was a guy whose passing statistics were pretty good, but he was also running for 465 yards, 7 touchdowns. So he was a true dual threat weapon. But I will say I'm excited about Ezell. I like that he's young. I like his pedigree at Alabama. I like that he worked his way up through the ranks. He's probably had a lot of influence from Saban, Cristobal, and I think he can bring a lot to the table in terms of our offense. What does his scheme look like? So I watched a few games just to get a sense. And again, I'm not an expert analyst in any of these areas, but what I saw was a lot of shotgun. Like, I don't think I saw any snaps under center and a lot of spread formations. I saw lots of 11 personnel, which means three wide receivers, one tight end, and one running back on the field. I saw a lot of pre snap motion, which I really like. Teams who are stagnant before the snap and don't run a lot of motions, it just perplexes me why you would not do that. Because those pre snap motions make defenses show their hand a little bit. And so he likes to do pre snap motions. He'll motion his tight ends into the backfield, use them as pullers in the run game or blockers in the passing game, or they'll leak out into the flats. He likes movement with his tight ends. As far as the run game goes, I saw a lot of gap scheme blocking and pulling guards and tackles in the run game. So, I see a lot of down blocks, and then I see you got two guards pulling to one side to just power rush, through, the right, side of the line in the 6 hole, in the 4 hole. I saw a lot of gap scheme blocking and pulls in the run game. I saw a few zone run looks. They were scattered throughout the running tape that I saw. I think he might do that just to kind of keep defensive coordinators honest, so they don't automatically think that every time they see a zone look, it's going to be a play action, because he does run a lot of zone looking play action passes. So the offensive linemen appear to be doing a zone block, usually inside zone, and then the quarterback pulls it out for a play action pass. I saw a lot of that in the offense. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. There's still a lot to be unknown. There's still a lot that's way above my head that I don't know about. But, this is what I'm expecting. All shotgun, no under center, and a lot of one tight end formations. So let's talk about some players. And I would be, I don't even know the word. I would be horribly mistaken if the first player I did not talk about on this year's team would be the program Demon Claiborne. I'm giving him the nickname. He's the program. 4-star prospect coming out of high school, 5'10", 195 pounds. He's lost 5 pounds since last year. Guess he's looking to be even more explosive, even more elusive. Some of the jump cuts that I've seen Claiborne do over his career at Wake Forest are like unlike anything I've seen since like a prime Le'Veon Bell. I mean, his jump cuts are sick. 2024 ran for over 1,000 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, 254 receiving yards, even though we all complained and know that Clawson did not use his running backs out of the backfield as pass catchers very much. He was still able to get 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the reason he should be nicknamed the program this year is because he could have easily chased the bag, or even if we gave him a big bag, which I'm sure we did, he could have chosen to declare for the draft or go to a quote-unquote bigger school where he's going to get bigger audiences and more national media attention. But instead, he chose to remain at Wake Forest for his senior season, despite a coaching change in the offseason. That is loyalty, man. Demon Claiborne, I salute you, sir, for your loyalty, for your talent. And I think this is the season You're still getting slept on, but this is the season where you're going to become a nationally known household name, especially if we can get our offensive line to produce at a fairly good rate, which I think we can, and we'll get into here in a second. But the second thing I want to talk about in terms of players is who's going to start at quarterback. You know, who is going to start at quarterback? We lost Hank Bachmeier. He ran out of eligibility. We lost Michael Kern. He ran out of eligibility. Here's my guess. My guess, if I had to make a guess here today, July 14th, I think, July 14th, 8 weeks before the season, 6 weeks before the season opener, I would say it's going to be Robbie Ashford. 6'2", 220 pounds. First of all, that's just a beast. It's like a linebacker in a quarterback's body. He was a highly rated 3-star prospect coming out of high school. He started 9 games as a sophomore for Auburn in 2022. And those 9 games were interesting. You know, he only had a 50% completion percentage. He threw for a reasonable amount of yards, nothing too special. He had 7 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, but those rushing numbers, they make me feel really good. They make me gush over the possibility of having a backfield with Claiborne and Ashford in it and what we could possibly do with that. 710 rushing yards that year as a true sophomore in the SEC, 7 rushing touchdowns. If you go watch just his highlight film against SEC defenses, this guy moves differently. He looks faster. He looks more explosive than SEC athletes when he's out there in space running. And we now have that at Wake Forest. Does his passing ability, his pocket presence, going through progressions, does that all need to be refined? Of course it does. Of course it does. But even with that, just from a rushing perspective, I say let's put Robbie out there and let's have Demond and Robbie just run all over these ACC defenses and let them try to stop just those two. He transferred to South Carolina after he lost his starting job as a junior at Auburn. And he was the backup last year to Lenoris Sellers, which there's no shame in being a backup to Lenoris Sellers. Lenoris Sellers might be a top 10 pick in the draft coming up next year. That's how good he is. I think he will certainly be a first-round pick. And so being back up to him, like, I'm not going to knock Ashford for that. He served a specialized role even as the backup, 227 yards on limited attempts, 2 rushing touchdowns. But the thing with Robbie Ashford is, and the reason I predict he will be the starting quarterback is because he's got the juice. And dudes are going to have problems in the ACC trying to run this dude down. Who's the other potential starter, though? I think the other potential starter, if it's not Robbie, I think it's going to be Deshaun Purdy. And that would be a surprise to me. But with who Deshaun Purdy is as a prospect, I think it's possible. He was a 3-star, pretty high 3-star rated quarterback coming out of high school. And as a transfer prospect, he's still a high-rated 3-star. He originally committed to Florida, the Gators, when he first entered the portal, but we were able to get him over here to Wake Forest. I think he probably saw there was more of an opportunity for him here at Wake Forest, so we were able to lure him away. I think that's a big win for the program. The first thing that sticks out about Deshaun Purdy is the prototypical NFL size for a quarterback. 6'4", 228 pounds. I mean, that's Josh Allen, right? I mean, that's the prototype of what you would look for. He's still got a lot of things to work on. From the games I watched a few games of him. Raw processor, doesn't always get to a second and third read. Elongated throwing motion, he doesn't have that quick, almost flick of the wrist passing motion. It's usually this long, elongated throwing motion. But he does have explosive arm talent. That, Deshaun can get the ball down the field. He can throw that thing, whether his feet are on a good platform or even not at times, he can launch that ball down the field. And I think that's really good. He started 6 games last year as a true freshman at Charlotte. And, he had his ups and downs. That's the best way to put it. In those 6 games, 1,802 yards, 50% completion percentage, 10 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Wasn't really a rushing threat for them. I've yet to see him really open it up and show us if he has any real speed to his game besides just the size. But he did show one game against the University it was Florida Atlantic, where he looked like a future NFL superstar. He threw for like almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, was dropping dimes, like 40, 50-yard dimes down the field. And that one game right there just showed, this kid has potential. He just needs more reps, more coaching to keep developing, and he could be something big for us. So we'll see who wins out between Purdy and Ashford. My bet is on Ashford because of the experience, because of the rushing ability. But we'll see what happens. And then we've got 2 other young QB prospects waiting in the wings. It's funny, I was at the mall yesterday in Winston-Salem, and I ran into one of these young prospects, these young quarterback prospects. I didn't tell him I was starting a YouTube channel about Wake Forest sports, but I did mention you guys are on the football team. I think I kind of am figuring out who you guys are. But we had a quick conversation, and I wish them good luck for the season. But the 2 young guys, they're both incoming freshmen, class of 2025. We've got Steel, the man of steel, Pizella. Lacks size, 5'11", 180, 185 pounds. But he was, a track star in high school. And he ran a 10.64 was his best 100-meter dash. And Tyreek's best time was only a 10.19. So he's only like half a second behind Tyreek Hill in terms of a 100-meter dash. That's pretty good. That's a lot of speed at the quarterback position. His senior year, he had 29 passing touchdowns, 60% completion percentage. But you look again at that dual threat ability, 1,040 rushing yards and eight rushing touchdowns. That's really solid. And then we've got Elijah Olke. I looked up how to get your name right, Elijah. Elijah Olke. The first thing that sticks out about Elijah to me is how strikingly similar he is built physically to Robbie Ashford. Now, I don't know what kind of running skills Olke has, but they're just kind of the same frame. He was the 58th ranked quarterback in the country in the 25 class. He also has a track and field history in high school. And you can see some of his stats from, I think that was either his junior or senior year. I can't remember. I wrote senior year there, but that might have been his junior year stats. But I like the way he took care of the football, only 3 interceptions, 60% completion percentage, 9 rushing touchdowns. So is he, despite only 216 rushing yards, is Olkey a future tush push weapon for the Deeks? We will have to find out. But I like that we have these 2 young guys in waiting. You never know what's going to happen with these young guys, but I wish them the best of luck. And I hope if they're good enough, they climb right up that depth chart and get some game action this season. Okay. So let's look quickly at the state of the roster. I'm not going to get into depth charts, who is going to start everywhere just yet. I think I'll do another video on that. Right now, I just want us to kind of take in the key losses and key additions on both sides of the ball. So these are guys who either transferred out, transferred in, or just ran out of eligibility. So on offense, again, I talked about it. We lost Bachmeier. We lost Kern. Wide receiver, we lost the vet, Taylor Morin, who I think we will miss a lot. We lost the idea of Donovan Green being healthy, which it was a shame because I think talent-wise, he's one of the most purely talented players to ever come to Wake Forest. He just was never able to stay healthy. Deuce Alexander, that's a big loss to me. Even as a young contributor, a freshman coming in there last year, he was already making some big plays for us. So I think he's a big loss. Horatio Fields, I would say, not too bad of a loss. He was more like a replacement level player for the ACC at receiver, a good 4th receiver to have. So I don't think I'm too sad about missing him. A lot of our O-line from last year is gone, though. Basically, all of them. There might be one, George Sell, who's coming back. But basically, our entire offensive line from last year is gone. That means Golbin, Pettibon, Eric Russell, Trost, Nick Sharp. They're all gone. But let's see what we added. So we talked about the quarterbacks. At receiver, I put Jeremiah Melvin on there with an asterisk by his name. I did that because I would call him an addition because he was a 4-star wide receiver prospect who Clawson had brought in 24. He redshirted, and with the coaching change, we could have easily lost Melvin. He could have easily decided, I'm going to go elsewhere. But Coach Dickert and company being able to re-recruit Melvin and keep him in the program, I'm calling that an addition. We've got Carlos Hernandez coming over from Washington State. I think he's going to be a contributor. Karate Brinson, he's coming in. I think he could contribute. I like Reginald Vick Jr. Even though his production was at a much lower level of college football, like he produced. Like I think Vick could be underrated and end up as one of our best receivers this year. And then Sterling Burkhalter, I like him out of Cincinnati. Never put up great numbers, but I think just as a serviceable guy who can catch some balls, be our 4th or 5th receiver, I think that's fine. Jamario Clements, he's a stud, man. Like I went back, I looked at some of his tape. I can't remember where he played last year. Was it Duquesne? It might have been Duquesne, but he's got good size, 5'11", 205 pounds, graduate transfer. We have running backs. We have Claiborne. We have Carney coming back. We've got Ty Clark. But just to have a guy like him just on the team just in case, I'm going to take that every time. Harry Lodge with an asterisk. He put his name in the transfer portal, then decided to come back to Wake Forest. So I'll take Harry back as an addition. I really like Will Lozelle or Lorzell. Will Lorzell, to me, could be a future stud tight end for the Wake Forest football team. He's already like coming in. He was a Washington State guy, and he's coming in 6'5", 250 pounds. He was young. I think he's only going to be a junior this year, I believe, or maybe even a sophomore. I think he could really even develop into someone who becomes our best tight end this as early as this season. So I'm excited to see him. And then on the offensive line, it feels like we kind of traded our old offensive line for most of Washington State's offensive line. So we got Fa'alili Fa'amo, who is the biggest prize from the additions on offense. He was getting offers from everywhere when he put his name in the transfer portal. Probably could have gone to a lot of different places, a lot of bigger brands and bigger schools in terms of national recognition than Wake Forest. But he chose to stay with his coach, Coach Dickert, and he came over. And we should be very grateful for that. I mean, that is a left tackle that we can plug and play, and we know he's going to be good. Same kind of deal with Devin Kailani. Devin is a solid, like, starting center, power four starting center. I think it says a lot that Coach Dickert chose him as one of the few players that is going to the ACC football media day in Charlotte. I think that shows the level of leadership and guarantee of him being our starting center. So I like him. Roderick Tia Lavea, some of his PFF stats from last season were not that great. He can also play guard. He might end up being a starting guard. Jacob Dennison, he's kind of interesting. So he's a graduate transfer from Ohio, never really started at Ohio. So it's like, what do we want with this guy who never could even be a starter at Ohio? Well, they highlighted him in the all access videos that we've been seeing over the summer from Wake. He's put on a little weight. And oddly enough, he played 50 offensive snaps last year and had a 90 PFF grade in those limited snaps. So I know it's a limited sample size, but like Jacob Dennison is this diamond in the rough that we found that maybe just never quite clicked with the coaching staff, that maybe we can put at right tackle or somewhere else on the line, and he can be a solid player for us. Who knows? Melvin Siani, he's probably the other, right tackle candidate transferring in. And then I'm going to put another asterisk player on here, Jason Ofut. So he was recruited by Clawson, had signed a letter of intent, but could have backed out of that when Clawson resigned. So Dickert basically had to re-recruit him. He's a 4-star prospect at offensive line, a huge human being. And I think he could end up, even as a true freshman, becoming a starting guard for us this year. So that's the additions on offense. Let's look at defense. To me, losing players on defense was not that big a deal. I mean, there's certain players we did not want to lose. But you saw the stats. We were a terrible defense last year. And we lost basically all of our defensive line. Jasheen Davis, Pointer, Cody, Kendron Wayman, Ganius, Maribel. We lost them all. But we replaced them with some good players too. I love Jaden Loving. I love Gabe Kirsch as a prospect. I like Nuer Gathuk. Gat Kuth. So we'll see how these guys perform. We don't know. We do know we have BJ Williams coming back, and he's going to be a big time player for us on the edge. But we'll see how it goes as far as defensive line. Linebacker, I don't think it really matters that much. We lost. I didn't like losing Branson Combs. I thought he had some potential. Andrew Hines as well. Didn't love losing those guys. And Frank Cusano is not a big addition by any means. But I expect us to have, Quincy Bryant and Dylan Hazen as our starting linebackers this year, regardless. So I'm not that mad about it. It may hurt our depth, but we also have some other younger players behind the two starters who might have developed and be ready to get thrown in there. And I'm hoping for a big bounce back season from Hazen, especially because what he showed early on, he could be a really special player. In terms of our defensive backfield, yeah, we lost some players. We lost some starters, Slocum and Colin Blue, especially. We lost some young, talented up-and-comers like Glasker, Neely, Antonio Robinson Jr. I did not like losing those guys, but at the same time, look at what our defense has been, right? We can only go up from here. So we brought in a few replacements, Kayron Prunty, Jalen Edmond. My favorite is Sasha Garcia. I think he might end up being a starting corner for us this year because I just like the way he plays. I watched some tape of him. He's scrappy. He's good in man coverage. He can play zone coverage. He's just kind of feisty and sticky when it comes to the way he guards receivers. So I like him a lot. And as we're getting towards the end, let's just do a little preview of the 2025 incoming freshmen. So we've already talked about Jayshawn Ofut, the interior offensive lineman who came out of Virginia. One interesting thing is when he got here, apparently he was 317 pounds, I think. And now he's all the way up to 6'4", 342 pounds. That is what makes me think if he can get the technical parts of playing guard down, he's a plug and play guy as a freshman at that size. And I would love to have, we don't see that type of size on Wake Forest offensive lines usually. Usually they're either missing the height aspect or the weight aspect. There's some compromise where they don't have both of those things going at the same time. He's got both. He's got the height, perfect height for a guard, and the weight for an NFL guard. And, you see his bench, you see his squat. He's a beast. We signed 22 other players, 3-star players. I'm going to go through some of my favorites. I liked Freddie Gillens. I like a 6-foot corner, 171 pounds out of South Carolina. We signed Cordell Bartley, I think out of Dudley High School in Greensboro. I wasn't sure if they were going to put him at receiver or DB. I think they've settled at putting him at corner. So 5'11", again, decent height for a corner, 173 pounds. But the dude also had 1,000 yards receiving in high schools in his last season at Dudley. So, I'm not saying we should make the kid Travis Hunter, but maybe if he has some offensive skills, give the kid a few snaps. Jamar Searcy out of California. What I liked about him, he's badly undersized. He's really undersized. But he's shifty and he explodes through holes. In the tape that I've watched, he's got burst. And so I like that type of burst. My favorite receiver in the class coming up is Jack Foley and it wasn't even really close. I like his size at 6'4", 205 pounds. He came out of Oregon. He just looks almost college ready from the start. Technically, he has good hands. I like Jack Foley a lot. Uh, Kadir Dembele, we'll see what he turns into. I like the fact that he's 6'3", so he's got some height. And with that height, you can put on a little more weight. We get him up to 6'3", 315 pounds. We're talking about a serious gap plugger in the interior. And then on the edge, Cole Funderburk. Just looking at his stats in one of the biggest divisions of Georgia football, just his sack numbers as a sophomore, junior, and senior, all in double digits. If you can play that high level and break out at that young of an age, in really, I think it was like 7A Georgia football program, high school program, I think you got some talent. And so I'm excited for Cole Funderburk. How does this class rank nationally? It ranks just about how we always rank, which is like in the 60s or maybe the high 50s if we're lucky. They ranked us 15th out of 17 teams in the ACC in terms of the freshmen. Our transfer rank wasn't that bad. Our transfer rank is 46th. And so that's kind of the freshman outlook of what's happening. And then finally, we're going to look at the schedule. So Vegas and the odds makers, they got us winning 4.5 games. Like that's the over-under for us this season. So we start April 29th against Kennesaw State, then Western Carolina. Then we start getting into some conference games. We play Oregon State because they are kind of conferenceless. Yeah, I think that's right. They don't have a conference really to speak of. So we've got them as an out of conference kind of Power 4 team that we're going to have to match up with. And then the second half of the schedule, SMU, who I think could be tough again this year. We'll see if Florida State can bounce back from the disaster that was last year. I don't think Virginia is going to be very good. I think their coach is on the hot seat, and I just don't think it's going to be too difficult for us to beat them. Who knows what Bill Belichick has got cooked up in Carolina, but at least we can scout their quarterback if Gio Lopez ends up starting. Then we have Delaware and then Duke to close out the season. 4.5 wins, like that's basically saying, like, if we look back, we should beat Kennesaw State, right? We should beat Western Carolina, right? So let's say those are 2 wins. We should beat Delaware. That's 3 wins right there. So what they're predicting is out of the rest of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games that we're only going to win 1 of those or 2 of those at most. And I just think, maybe I'm biased. Maybe I've drank too much of the all access Kool-Aid. Maybe I'm too hyped up on watching Robbie Ashford torch with his legs these SEC defenses. But I think if our offensive line can hold it together, we've got Damon Claiborne, we've got an athletic quarterback. We don't need the most dynamic receiving weapons. Somebody hopefully will break out in that area. We have good tight ends. Like, I think our offense can score points. I really think we can. And I also think that, our defensive coaching will improve. The players, the personnel, we'll see. But we do have 2 linebackers coming back. We've got Devon Patterson, who I think is primed to break out as a star in the ACC. Same with BJ Williams. So we'll see what happens. But I just want to thank you all for watching. Those of you who have watched this inaugural edition of Wake Nation 21, please do all the things if you've gotten to this point. If you like this content, like, subscribe, comment, share it with some of your friends. Say, hey, there's finally someone on YouTube talking about Wake Forest sports. Click the notifications. Expect content every week. So I haven't put the exact schedule together yet, just as of now. But you can expect at least one video every week dedicated to Wake Forest sports. You can find us on Facebook. I just made the Facebook page, Wake Nation 21, and join me there. I'll post all the videos. I'll make other posts about Wake there. YouTube, this is where you found me, but it's at Wake Nation 21. And thank you again for taking the time to watch all of this analysis with me. And I think it's going to be a fun season. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to watching and interacting with you guys. And so until next time, take care of yourself and go Deeks.